The barn door hung crooked on its hinges, swaying in the dry wind that carried dust and the smell of old hay. Caleb Mercer stood just outside, his hand resting on the weathered wood, listening to the voices inside, low, cruel, transactional. He'd ridden into Stillwater that morning looking for work, not trouble. But trouble had a way of finding a man in towns like this, especially in the autumn of 1870, when the war's ghosts still walked freely and the law wore whichever face paid it best. "Next lot," a voice announced from inside. Flat, bored, two of 'em, boys 9, girls maybe 12, strong backs both, no family to come looking. Caleb's jaw tightened. He shouldn't have stopped, shouldn't have dismounted, shouldn't have tied his horse to the post outside this half-collapsed barn on the edge of town where decent people didn't go and the sheriff pretended not to see. But he had. He pushed the door open. The barn was darker than the afternoon outside, lit only by shafts of dusty sunlight cutting through gaps in the roof. A dozen men stood scattered around bales of hay, hands in pockets, eyes cold and calculating. At the center, on a raised platform made of old crates, stood 2 children. The girl was thin, her dress torn at the hem and stained with mud. Her dark hair fell in tangled waves over her shoulders. She stood with her shoulders back, chin lifted, but her hands, tied in front of her with rough hemp rope, trembled. Beside her a boy, smaller, his shirt too big, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His wrists were bound too, the rope looped to his sister's so they couldn't be separated. He didn't look at the men watching him. He looked at the ground, his small chest rising and falling too fast. The auctioneer, a man with a gray beard and a stained vest, gestured lazily toward them. "Orphans, found 'em squatting in an abandoned house 2 days west of here. No papers, no claims, clean slate. You buy 'em, you own 'em, legal as Sunday." "Legal," Caleb muttered under his breath, his hands curled into fists at his sides. One of the men near the front stepped closer to the platform, squinting at the children like he was inspecting livestock. "The boy looks weak. What am I supposed to do with him?" "Teach him," the auctioneer said with a shrug, "or sell him on when he's bigger, your call." The girl's eyes flicked toward the man, and for a moment, something sharp and defiant flashed across her face. But then the boy beside her made a small, choked sound, half sob, half gasp, and she immediately turned toward him. "Samuel," she whispered. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the murmur of the crowd. "Samuel, look at me." The boy didn't move. "Samuel," her voice cracked just slightly, "please." Slowly the boy lifted his head. His face was pale, streaked with dirt and dried tears. His eyes, wide and terrified, locked onto hers. "I'm here," she said softly. "I'm right here." He nodded barely, and she leaned closer, her bound hands brushing against his. "We're going to be okay." All right, the auctioneer cut in, waving a hand impatiently. "Enough of that, let's start the bidding. Who's first?" Silence. Then, from the back, $50 for the girl. Caleb's stomach turned. The girl's face went pale, her lips parted, but no sound came out. The boy, Samuel, made a strangled noise and grabbed at her sleeve with his tied hands. "50, the auctioneer repeated, nodding. "Good start, anyone else?" Another voice, "60 for the boy." The girl's head snapped toward the voice, her eyes wide with panic. "No, no, please." "70 for both," someone else called. 80. 90. The girl was shaking now, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. She turned to her brother, her voice breaking. "Samuel, listen to me." "I don't want to go," the boy cried, his voice high and desperate. "Eliza, I don't want to." "You won't," she said quickly, fiercely. She pulled him closer, their bound hands tangling together. "I won't let them, I promise I won't." 100, a man near the front said. He was older, with a hard face and a long coat. He didn't smile. "For the girl, just the girl." The auctioneer grinned. "Now we're talking. 100 for the girl, anyone counter." Eliza's knees buckled. She grabbed her brother's arm to steady herself, her eyes filling with tears. "No, no, please, you can't." 120 for both, another man said. The auctioneer hesitated, glancing between them. 120 for the pair, or 100 for the girl alone, what'll it be? The room fell silent. Eliza's breath hitched. She looked down at Samuel, whose face was buried against her shoulder now, his small body shaking with sobs. She closed her eyes, her lips moving in something that might have been a prayer. Then quietly she whispered, "Sir, I'll be brave for my brother." Caleb didn't realize he'd stepped forward until he spoke. 200. Every head in the barn turned toward him. The auctioneer blinked. 200. For Bart. Caleb said. His voice was steady, but his heart hammered against his ribs. $200 for both of them together. The room erupted in murmurs. The man in the long coat frowned, his eyes narrowing as he sized Caleb up. "Who the hell are you?" Caleb ignored him. He kept his eyes on the auctioneer. 200, do we have a deal or not? The auctioneer studied him for a long moment, then grinned slowly. $200, sold. Eliza's eyes snapped open. She stared at Caleb, her expression unreadable, fear, disbelief, something else he couldn't name. Samuel peeked out from behind her shoulder, his tear-streaked face pale and confused. Caleb walked forward, pulling a worn leather pouch from his coat. He counted out the bills slowly, deliberately, and handed them to the auctioneer, who stuffed them into his vest without counting. "Pleasure doing business," the man said, waving toward the children. "They're all yours." Caleb stepped onto the platform. Up close, the kids looked even smaller. Eliza was staring at him now, her jaw tight, her hands still bound in front of her. Samuel clung to her side, his eyes wide and terrified. Caleb crouched down so he was level with them. He pulled a knife from his belt. Eliza flinched, pulling Samuel behind her. "Easy," Caleb said quietly. He held up the knife, showing her the blade. "I'm just cutting the ropes." She didn't move, didn't blink. Caleb reached forward slowly and sliced through the hemp binding her wrists. The rope fell away, and she immediately pulled her hands to her chest, rubbing the raw, red marks left behind. He cut Samuel's ropes next. The boy didn't move, didn't speak. Caleb stood, sliding the knife back into his belt. He looked down at them, these two small, terrified children who had just been sold like cattle, and felt something old and bitter rise in his throat. "Come on," he said quietly, "let's get out of here." Eliza didn't move. She stared up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "What are you going to do with us?" Caleb held her gaze. "Nothing you don't want me to." She didn't believe him. He could see it in her eyes. But she took her brother's hand, and together they followed him out of the barn. The sun was sinking low by the time they reached the edge of town. Caleb's horse, a sturdy roan mare named Dust, waited patiently where he'd tied her, flicking her tail at flies. He untied the reins and glanced back at the children. Eliza stood a few feet away, still holding Samuel's hand. She hadn't let go since they left the barn. Her eyes darted between Caleb and the horse, wary and calculating. "Can you ride?" Caleb asked. She nodded slowly. "Good," he gestured toward Dust. "Both of you up." Eliza hesitated, then lifted Samuel onto the saddle. The boy gripped the horn with both hands, his knuckles white. She climbed up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Caleb took the reins and started walking, leading the horse down the dirt road that cut through the valley. The town disappeared behind them, swallowed by dust and distance. They walked in silence for a long time. Finally, Samuel spoke. His voice was small. "Where are we going?" "My place," Caleb said, "about an hour west." "And then what?" Eliza asked. Her tone was sharp, defensive. Caleb glanced back at her. "Then we figure it out." "Figure what out?" "What happens next?" "You paid for us," she said flatly. "That's what happens next, isn't it?" Caleb stopped walking. He turned to face her fully, his expression hard. "I didn't buy you to own you." "Then why'd you do it?" He held her gaze. "Because nobody else was going to." She didn't look away. "People don't just do that." "Some people do." Not in my experience. Caleb exhaled slowly, then started walking again. Then maybe your experience has been shit. Samuel made a small sound, half laugh, half sob. Eliza tightened her arms around him. They walked for another 20 minutes before Caleb spoke again. What happened to your folks? Eliza didn't answer right away. When she finally did, her voice was cold. They're dead. How? Does it matter? Maybe. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, fever, 2 months ago, we had a homestead, small place, nothing much. After they died, a man came, said we owed money on the land, said if we couldn't pay, he'd take it. We couldn't pay. So he took it. And us. Caleb's jaw tightened. He sold us to the auctioneer, Eliza continued, her voice flat. Said we were orphans, no family, nobody to come looking. He was right. Samuel sniffled. Eliza rubbed his back gently. What was the man's name? Caleb asked. Why? Just asking. She studied him for a moment, then said, Garrett, Thomas Garrett. Caleb stopped walking. The name hit him like a punch to the gut. Eliza frowned. What? He didn't answer. His mind was racing, pulling up memories he'd buried years ago, memories of a different homestead, a different family, a different pair of children who'd lost everything. You know him. Eliza said. It wasn't a question. Caleb turned slowly to face her. His expression was unreadable. Yeah, I know him. How? He hesitated, then said quietly, he did the same thing to my family, 8 years ago. Eliza's eyes widened. My parents had a ranch, Caleb continued, his voice low, small like yours. After the war, Garrett came around saying they owed taxes. They didn't, but he had papers, fake ones, signed by some judge he had in his pocket. When my father refused to leave, Garrett brought the sheriff. They burned the house. My parents, they didn't make it out. Samuel's breath hitched. Eliza stared at Caleb, her face pale. You were there. I was 14, he said. I got out through a back window. My sister. He stopped, his throat tight. She didn't. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Eliza whispered, why didn't you stop him? Caleb's voice was rough. I tried. I ran to town, tried to get help. Nobody would listen to a kid. By the time I got back, it was too late. Eliza looked away, her jaw tight. I spent the next 8 years working ranches, saving money, staying quiet, Caleb said. I didn't know Garrett was still doing it. Didn't know he was still taking families. He is, Eliza said bitterly, and nobody stops him. Caleb met her eyes. I should have stopped him 8 years ago. You were a kid. I was old enough to know right from wrong. Eliza didn't respond. Caleb exhaled slowly, then started walking again. I'm not letting him do it again. What's that supposed to mean? It means when we get to my place, you and Samuel are staying, and Garrett, I'm going to deal with him. Eliza's voice was sharp. How? However, I have to. That's not an answer. Caleb stopped and turned to face her. His voice was steady, but there was something hard beneath it. You want an answer? Fine, I'm going to make sure he can't do this to anyone else. Ever, that good enough. Eliza studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, quietly she said, why do you care? Because I didn't care enough the first time, Caleb said, and I've been carrying that weight for 8 years. I'm done carrying it. Samuel's small voice broke the silence. Are you going to hurt him? Caleb looked at the boy, this small, terrified kid who'd been sold like property, and something in his chest twisted. I'm going to stop him, he said quietly. That's all you need to know. Eliza held his gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. They didn't speak again until Caleb's homestead came into view, a small cabin nestled against the hillside, surrounded by fenced pasture and a barn that had seen better days. This is it, Caleb said. Eliza looked at the cabin, then back at him. You live here alone? Yeah. Why? He didn't answer. She didn't push. 3 days passed. Caleb spent them fixing the fence line, chopping wood, and pretending everything was normal. Eliza and Samuel stayed close to the cabin, quiet and watchful. The girl helped where she could, mending a torn shirt, sweeping the floor, boiling water for coffee. The boy mostly sat on the porch, whittling sticks with a knife Caleb had given him. They didn't talk much. On the fourth morning, Caleb woke to the sound of hoofbeats. He was out of bed and pulling on his boots before his mind fully caught up. He grabbed his rifle from beside the door and stepped onto the porch. 4 riders were coming up the road, moving slow and deliberate. The sun was just cresting the hills behind them, casting long shadows across the valley. Caleb recognized the man in front immediately. Thomas Garrett. He was older than Caleb remembered, grayer, thicker around the middle, but his eyes were the same, cold, calculating, the kind of eyes that saw people as property. Beside him rode a man in a sheriff's badge, Deputy Lang, a weasel of a man who'd been on Garrett's payroll for years. The other 2 were hired guns, rough-looking men with rifles across their saddles. Caleb stepped off the porch, his rifle held loose at his side. Garrett reined his horse to a stop about 20 feet away. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Caleb Mercer, heard you were back in the area. Garrett, Caleb said flatly. Heard something else too, Garrett continued, leaning forward in his saddle. Heard you bought yourself a couple of orphans at the Stillwater auction. That true? Caleb didn't answer. Garrett's smile widened. See, that's interesting, because those orphans, they belonged to me. I was the one who brought them to auction, and I'm pretty sure I'm entitled to a cut of that sale. You already got your cut, Caleb said, from the auctioneer. That was his cut, Garrett said. I'm talking about mine. You're not getting anything. Garrett's smile faded. You're making a mistake, boy. I'm not a boy anymore. No, Garrett said slowly. I suppose you're not, but you're still making a mistake. Behind Caleb, the cabin door creaked open. He didn't turn. But he heard Eliza's sharp intake of breath. Garrett's eyes flicked past Caleb toward the cabin, and his expression shifted, something dark and satisfied. There they are, Eliza, Samuel, you 2 come on out here. They're not going anywhere, Caleb said. That's not your call. It is now. Deputy Lang shifted in his saddle, his hand moving toward his gun. Careful, Mercer, you're interfering with legal business. Legal, Caleb repeated. His voice was hard. You call what you did to their family legal. I call it business, Garrett said. Same business I've been running for years, and if you're smart, you'll stay out of it. You burned my family's ranch, Caleb said quietly. Killed my parents, my sister, you remember that. Garrett tilted his head, studying Caleb like he was trying to place him. Then his eyes widened slightly. Mercer, yeah, I remember. Your old man was stubborn, wouldn't leave when I told him to. He didn't owe you anything. He owed the county. I was just collecting. You were stealing. Garrett shrugged. Call it what you want. Point is, I'm still here, and your family's not, so who really won that fight? Caleb's finger tightened on the rifle. Easy, Garrett said, raising a hand. You shoot me, Lang here's got legal cause to put you down, and then those kids, they'll end up right back where they started, maybe worse. Caleb's jaw clenched. Garrett leaned back in his saddle, his smile returning. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to hand over Eliza and Samuel. I'm going to take them back to town, sell them proper, and you're going to walk away. Clean, simple. No, Caleb said. No, not happening. Garrett's expression darkened. You're a fool, Mercer, just like your father. Maybe. Deputy, Garrett said, not taking his eyes off Caleb. Tell him what happens if he doesn't cooperate. Lang cleared his throat. If you don't hand over the children, I'll have to arrest you for theft and resisting arrest and anything else I can think of. Theft, Caleb repeated. Those kids are property, Lang said. Legally speaking, you took them without proper transfer of ownership. That's theft. I paid $200. To a crooked auctioneer, Garrett said, doesn't count. Caleb stared at him. You're a snake. I'm a businessman. Behind Caleb, Eliza stepped onto the porch. Her voice was quiet but steady. We're not going with you. Garrett's eyes flicked to her. You don't get a choice, girl. Yes, I do. No, Garrett said coldly. You really don't. Samuel appeared beside his sister, gripping her hand. His face was pale, but his voice was clear. We're staying with Mr. Mercer. Garrett laughed, a short, cruel sound. You hear that, Lang? The boy thinks he's got a say. Caleb stepped forward, putting himself between the riders and the children. You're not taking them. Then you're going to jail, Lang said, and they're coming with us anyway. Garrett leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. Last chance, Mercer, walk away. Caleb met his eyes. No. Garrett's smile disappeared. He straightened in his saddle and nodded toward Lang. Arrest him. Lang started to dismount. And then from the road behind them, a voice called out, That's far enough. Everyone turned. An old man on a gray horse was riding up the road, a rifle resting across his lap. Behind him were 3 more riders, ranch hands, by the look of them, rough men with sun-darkened faces and hard eyes. Garrett frowned. Who the hell are you? The old man reined his horse to a stop beside Garrett's. Name's Hutchins. I own the ranch 5 miles south, and I've been watching you run this con for too long, Garrett. This isn't your business, old man. It is when you're burning families out of their homes and stealing their kids, Hutchins said. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. I knew the Mercers, good people, and I know what you did to them. Garrett's jaw tightened. You got proof. Don't need proof, Hutchins said. I got witnesses, and I got enough men to make sure you don't pull this again. Lang's hand moved toward his gun. One of Hutchins' men raised his rifle. Don't. The deputy froze. Garrett stared at Hutchins, his face red. You're making a mistake. No, Hutchins said. I'm fixing one. So let me ask you something, friend. If you were standing on that porch, watching those men ride away, would you feel relief? Or would you feel the weight of knowing it's not really over, that men like Garrett don't just disappear? Take a breath, pour yourself something warm. Think about what it takes to stand up when nobody else will. If you're still with me, tap subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Tell me in the comments, would you have opened your door to those kids, or would you have kept riding? Now let's get back to the story. Garrett and his men left without another word, their horses kicking up dust as they rode back toward town. Lang kept glancing over his shoulder. Face pale. Hutchins and his ranch hands stayed until the riders were out of sight, then tipped their hats and turned their horses homeward. You need anything, Mercer, Hutchins said before he left. You come find me. Caleb nodded. Appreciate it. When they were gone, the valley fell silent. Caleb stood on the porch, watching the empty road. His hands were still shaking, adrenaline, fear, something else he couldn't name. Behind him, Eliza spoke. Why did he help you? Caleb turned. She was standing in the doorway, Samuel pressed against her side. Her expression was guarded, but there was something softer in her eyes now. He knew my father, Caleb said. Before the fire, they worked together sometimes, helped each other during hard winters. And he just showed up. Word travels fast in small valleys. Caleb leaned against the porch railing. He probably heard Garrett was sniffing around and figured it was trouble. Eliza studied him for a long moment, then, quietly, thank you. Caleb blinked. For what? For not letting them take us. He shook his head. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. He didn't know what to say to that. Samuel stepped forward, his small hand reaching out hesitantly. Mr. Mercer. Caleb crouched down so he was eye level with the boy. Yeah. Are they going to come back? Caleb wanted to lie, wanted to tell the kid everything was fine, that the bad men were gone forever. But he didn't. I don't know, he said honestly. Maybe. Samuel's face crumpled. Caleb reached out slowly, carefully, and rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. But if they do, I'll be here, and so will Mr. Hutchins, and anyone else who's willing to stand up. You're not alone, Samuel, not anymore. The boy's eyes filled with tears. He threw his arms around Caleb's neck, burying his face against his shoulder. Caleb froze, startled. Then slowly, he wrapped his arms around the boy and held him. Eliza watched, her expression unreadable. Then, quietly, she stepped forward and knelt beside them. She didn't say anything. She just rested her hand on Samuel's back. They stayed like that for a long time, the three of them, tangled together on the porch, holding on like they were the only solid things in a world that kept shifting beneath them. That night, Caleb cooked a simple meal: beans, bread, a bit of salted pork. They ate in silence at the small wooden table inside the cabin. Afterward, Eliza helped clean up while Samuel sat by the fire, his eyes heavy. He's exhausted, Eliza said quietly, drying a tin plate. So are you, Caleb said. She didn't argue. You can take the bed, Caleb said. Both of you, I'll sleep out here. That's not. It's fine, he interrupted. I've slept on worse. She looked like she wanted to argue, but she was too tired. She nodded and took Samuel's hand, leading him toward the small bedroom at the back of the cabin. Caleb banked the fire and stretched out on the floor near the hearth, using his coat as a pillow. The cabin settled around him, the creak of old wood, the whisper of wind through the eaves. He closed his eyes, but sleep didn't come. He kept seeing Garrett's face, kept hearing his voice. Your old man was stubborn, wouldn't leave when I told him to. 8 years he'd carried the weight of that night, the smoke, the screams, the feeling of helplessness as he watched his home burn. And now here he was, with 2 kids who'd just gone through the same thing. History repeating itself. Unless he stopped it. The next morning, Caleb woke to the smell of coffee. He sat up, disoriented, and saw Eliza at the stove, stirring a pot. You didn't have to do that, he said, his voice rough with sleep. You didn't have to take us in, she replied without turning around. Fair point. Samuel was still asleep in the bedroom, his small form curled under a blanket. Caleb stood and walked to the table. Eliza poured him a cup of coffee, strong and black, and set it in front of him. Thank you, he said. She nodded and sat down across from him. They drank in silence for a while. Finally, Eliza spoke. What happens now? Caleb looked at her. What do you want to happen? I want Samuel to be safe. He is. For how long? Her voice was sharp. You heard Garrett. He's not going to stop. And even if he does, someone else will come. Someone always comes. Caleb set down his cup. Then we make sure they don't. How? He hesitated, then said, Hutchins has land, more than he can work alone. He's been looking for help. I talked to him last night before he left. He said if you wanted, he'd give you and Samuel a place. A real place. Work, wages, a roof. Eliza stared at him. Why would he do that? Because he's a decent man, and because he doesn't want to see what happened to my family happen to anyone else. She looked away, her jaw tight. And what about you? What about me? Where will you be? Caleb met her eyes, right here, making sure Garrett doesn't come back. You can't fight him alone. Nay, I'm not alone. She didn't look convinced. Caleb leaned forward, his voice steady. Eliza, I'm not going to let anything happen to you or Samuel, I promise. Promises don't mean much, she said quietly. Maybe not, but I'm going to keep this one anyway. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. 2 weeks passed. Caleb spent the days working his land, repairing the barn, checking the fence line. Eliza and Samuel stayed with him, settling into a rhythm, small chores, quiet meals, evenings by the fire. Garrett didn't come back. But Caleb knew he would. It happened on a gray afternoon, when the clouds hung low and heavy over the valley. Caleb was chopping wood behind the cabin when he heard the sound of hoofbeats, slow, deliberate, closer than they should have been. He set down the axe and walked around the cabin. Garrett was alone this time. No deputies, no hired guns, just him, sitting on his horse at the edge of the property, watching the cabin with cold, calculating eyes. Caleb stepped into the open, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. Garrett smiled. "Didn't think I'd come back, did you?" "I knew you would." "Smart man." Garrett dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. "I'm not here to fight, Mercer. I'm here to talk." "We've got nothing to talk about." "I think we do." Garrett took a few steps closer. "See, I've been thinking. You cost me a lot of money taking those kids, and I don't appreciate that." "Good." Garrett's smile faded. "You think this is over? You think Hutchins and his ranch hands scared me off? They didn't. They just delayed things." "Then why are you here alone?" "Because I wanted to give you a chance," Garrett said. "One last chance. Walk away. Leave the kids with me. I'll sell them fair, split the profit with you. You can take your money and disappear. Nobody has to get hurt." Caleb stared at him. "You really think I'd do that?" "I think you're not stupid enough to die for two orphans you barely know." "Then you don't know me at all." Garrett's expression darkened. "You're making a mistake, Mercer." "So you keep saying." Garrett's hand moved toward his coat. Caleb's revolver was out of its holster and aimed before Garrett's fingers touched fabric. "Don't," Caleb said quietly. Garrett froze, his eyes flicked to the gun, then back to Caleb's face. "You're not going to shoot me." "Try me." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then from behind Caleb, a voice, "I think you should listen to him." Caleb glanced over his shoulder. Hutchins was riding up the road, his rifle resting across his lap. Behind him were 4 ranch hands, all armed. Garrett's face went pale. "How?" "Told you, Garrett," Hutchins said calmly. "Word travels fast in small valleys. You come sniffing around Mercer's land, somebody notices." One of the ranch hands, a lean man named Cole, spoke up. "Garrett, I branded calves with you 20 years ago. Don't make me choose sides here." Garrett looked around at the men surrounding him, men he'd known, worked with, maybe even called friends once. His jaw tightened. "This isn't over," he said. "Yeah," Hutchins said, "it is." Garrett stared at him, then at Caleb. Finally, he climbed back onto his horse. "You're all making a mistake." "Ride out, Garrett," Hutchins said, "and don't come back." Garrett turned his horse and rode away, disappearing down the valley road. Caleb lowered his gun, his hand shaking. Hutchins dismounted and walked over. "You all right, son?" Caleb nodded. "He'll leave you alone now," Hutchins said. "Men like Garrett only push when they think they can win. He knows he can't." "Thank you," Caleb said quietly. Hutchins clapped him on the shoulder. "Your father would have done the same for me." That night, Caleb sat on the porch with Eliza and Samuel. The sky was clear, the stars sharp and bright overhead. Samuel was asleep, his head resting on Eliza's lap. She ran her fingers through his hair absently, her eyes distant. "We're going to Hutchins' ranch tomorrow," she said quietly. Caleb nodded. "He'll take care of you." "I know," she paused. "What about you?" "I'll be here. Alone. That's how I like it." She didn't respond. After a while, Samuel stirred, blinking sleepily. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, and looked at Caleb. "Mr. Mercer." "Yeah, buddy. Are you going to be okay when we leave?" Caleb's throat tightened. "I'll be fine." Samuel's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to go." "Hey," Caleb said gently, "you're going to a good place. Mr. Hutchins is a good man, and your sister will be with you. You'll be safe." "But what about you?" Caleb smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'll be brave for you." Samuel's face crumpled. He threw his arms around Caleb's neck, holding on tight. Eliza's eyes shone with tears. She leaned forward, wrapping her arms around both of them. And for the second time in 2 weeks, Caleb found himself holding these two kids like they were the only thing keeping him tethered to the world. "I'll be brave for you," he whispered again. 3 months later, Caleb rode to Hutchins' ranch. Eliza met him at the gate. She looked different, healthier, stronger. There was color in her cheeks and a steadiness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "You came," she said, surprised. "Said I would." Samuel ran up behind her, grinning. "Mr. Mercer." Caleb crouched down, and the boy barreled into him, laughing. "Look," Samuel held up his hands, showing calluses. "I've been working. Mr. Hutchins says I'm good with horses." "That's great, buddy," Caleb said, ruffling his hair. Eliza watched them, a small smile on her lips. Later, as the sun set, she walked Caleb back to his horse. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You've already thanked me." "I know, but I mean it." Caleb nodded. "Take care of him." "I will," she hesitated, then added, "Take care of yourself." "I'll try." She smiled, and for the first time it reached her eyes. Caleb rode home as dusk settled over the valley. When he reached his cabin, he lit a lantern and sat on the porch, staring out at the dark hills. He thought about his family, his parents, his sister, all the people he'd lost. And he thought about Eliza and Samuel, still breathing, still fighting, still here. It wasn't redemption, not really. But it was something. And for now, that was enough. The stars glittered overhead, the wind whispered through the grass, and Caleb Mercer sat alone, carrying his ghosts a little lighter than before.